Welcome to this online service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the South Hills, also known as Sunnyhill. Our mission is to create a more just and compassionate community within and beyond our walls. My name is Krista Stanley, and I serve as a worship associate for this congregation. If you are a newcomer or visitor to our congregation, please let us know you're here by posting a comment here on Facebook or YouTube, or by going to sunnyhill.org and clicking on the button that says New to Sunnyhill. We would love to let you know how you can connect with the congregation even during this time when our building is closed. Our opening words were written by Scott Taylor. When our days turn cold and the light dims, may we take hold of the hands reaching out and let them lead us to the comforting flame. When oppression and indignity rise, may we kindle the lamp of justice together. When exhaustion seeps into our bones, may we let the soft light lead us to rest. And when joy sneaks in and surprises us with grace, may we stop for just one sacred moment and celebrate. Welcome once again to this worship service.
Please join us in saying the words for lighting our chalice.
We light this chalice to affirm that new light is ever waiting to break through. May we be open to this light and to the rich possibilities that it brings us.
As the snow came falling down this week, I enjoyed being able to sit and just watch. Snowfall sometimes gives you that opportunity, the chance to slow down and just be still. I find snowflakes to be one of nature's most beautiful gifts. These crystals, formed by dust and water vapor, are such a small and seemingly trivial piece of the environment, especially when compared to the masses of our universe. Did you know that snowflakes that naturally fall from the sky truly are one of a kind? Isn't that incredible? It seems impossible to me, but it's fascinatingly true. The first photograph of a snowflake was taken in January 1885 by Wilson Bentley, which, in addition to having a pretty cool name, was also pretty ahead of his time. Wilson Bentley was also fascinated by snowflakes, and once he got that first image, he was hooked. He went on to photograph thousands of snowflakes, each of them one of a kind. Here are some of the images of snowflakes that Wilson Bentley captured over 130 years ago. As we approach the holiday season in this topsy-turvy year, it can be tempting to want to overcompensate for the many things that our families missed out on this year, to try to up the holiday cheer. My challenge to all of you is instead to take this one holiday season during this topsy-turvy year to slow down and watch the snowflakes. Appreciate the moments of stillness that this season is giving us. Instead of feeling the need to fill our days with new recipes, crafts, and activities, let's try for more moments of self-care, deep breathing, long walks, and examining all of those one-of-a-kind snowflakes as they fall from the sky.
As we move into the season of Advent leading up to Christmas, it seems appropriate to share this poem by Jim Burklow. It imagines the conversation that might have taken place when Mary told Joseph that she was pregnant. God did it isn't an explanation, said Joseph. He got no account for the baby's chromosomes, no description of the mechanism that transmuted the divine shadow into royal blood. The devil made me do it would have sounded better to me, said Joseph, though it never did him any good when he said it to his old girlfriends. It was a mystery to him. What moved him to listen for the rhyme and puzzle for the reason that Mary gave him the news in the manner that she did? A mystery that put him at peace. There was something in the way she held his hand that no medical journal article could correlate. Something in the way she gazed into his eyes that eluded the grasp of genomic research. I don't ask you to believe what I am saying, she said. I don't ask you to take my word for it. I just ask you to love as if. Love me as if I were yours. Love this baby as if he were yours, as I love you as if you were mine. Love as if makes every child divine. Love as if fits all into David's line. Love as if this love was meant for you. Love as if this Christmas tale is true. Each week at this time in the service, we share joys and sorrows submitted by members of the congregation. We share both the things that we're celebrating and the things that we're grieving, so they need not be held alone. After each joy or sorrow that I share, please respond by saying, "We hold you in our hearts." A sorrow that many of you have already heard, submitted by Julianne Sullivan. Julianne says, "It is with a heavy heart that I share that Karen Zoller lost her battle with cancer last Saturday. She was a longtime member, supporter, and past president of this community and will be missed by many. A memorial service will be held when we can all gather together in person again." To all of Karen's friends here at Sunnyhill and elsewhere, we hold you in our hearts. A joy from Sandy Ober. Sandy says, "My husband Russ underwent vascular surgery last Tuesday. He did very well, and his surgeon was pleased with the outcome. Thank you to everyone in the Sunnyhill community for all the thoughts and prayers this week." To Sandy and Russ, we hold you in our hearts. A sorrow from Joe Barker. Joe says, "A dear family member, Fran Makula, passed this weekend. Please remember and keep in your thoughts her 3 sisters and 3 sons. To Joe and to Fran's family, we hold you in our hearts." A sorrow from Lindsay and Jim Downs. Lindsay's mother, Lori Green, passed away this week after a 2.5-year battle with ovarian cancer. She'd been in hospice care and surrounded by loved ones prior to her death. To Lindsay and her family, we hold you in our hearts. Finally, on a personal note, my 87-year-old mother, Bonnie McGaw, recently suffered a fall at home. Fortunately, there do not appear to have been any serious injuries related to the fall, but she did test positive for COVID. Both of my parents have had what seem to be relatively minor COVID symptoms for the past week or so. As of today, my mother is back home and being treated at home by a home health care nurse. All of us would appreciate your good thoughts and prayers. To the McGaw family, we hold you in our hearts. Let us keep in mind all these joys and sorrows, as well as those that are held too closely to be shared at this time.
Find a stillness.
We had our first real snowfall of the year here in Pittsburgh 4 or 5 days ago. I happened to be awake late at night as the snow came down and began to carpet the ground, a white blanket on the cold, dark earth. I stepped outside for just a minute or two and heard the gathering silence of the snow, the quiet stillness that snowfall brings, the usual sounds of the street and the natural world slightly muffled and muted. And for a moment, a beautiful, holy moment, I was aware of only the stillness and silence of the falling snow. In the midst of the continuing chaos and swirling uncertainty of our times, that crystalline moment felt like a gift and a blessing. And after the year that we have had, we need all the moments of graceful stillness that we can get. Of course, in a way, stillness has been imposed upon us. Pandemic-related shutdowns and travel restrictions and cancellations have, for most of us, resulted in our usual spheres of activity being greatly reduced and curtailed so that everything occurs in a much tighter orb of movement centered around our homes. But while the physical range of our activities may have shrunk, there has not necessarily been any corresponding increase in stillness or silence in our lives, either externally or internally. At the beginning of the pandemic, some of us hoped that the enforced tamping down of our usual activities might lead to more centered, contemplative lives, that we would somehow manage to make a virtue of necessity. But unfortunately, that hope has not been realized for most of us. If anything, the pandemic and our ongoing political and social crises have led to even more frenetic anxiety and worrying than ever before. While we may be more physically restricted, our emotional and spiritual lives are all over the place, not at all stilled or centered most of the time. And that's a real problem. This lack of spiritual stillness and centeredness can lead to physical and emotional illness and disorders. It can also lead to existential crises and many dark nights of the soul. Advent, this season leading up to Christmas, is meant to be a time of quiet expectancy, a time to contemplate mystery and possibility, a time to slow down, a time to make room in our lives for something new to enter and to change us. Unfortunately, most of us, myself included, frequently fail miserably at living into the premise and the promise of the Advent season. And this year is certainly no exception. Instead of making room in our lives for something new that might transform us, we tend to stuff our lives and ourselves full with food, with drink, with material things, with things that glitter and gleam and buzz and blare, filling every nook and cranny of our being, the way we fill the space beneath the Christmas tree with so many things and so very little clear space. As I mentioned, we need stillness and silence in our lives to stay healthy and sane. So it is in all of our best interests to find ways to make space for these things, especially now in this season during this most challenging of times. But beyond maintaining and improving the physical and emotional well-being of ourselves and our loved ones, stillness has an even deeper purpose. We often find ourselves falling into the trap of no time, feeling like we have no time for any of the truly important things in life. As Christine Walters Paintner writes, when we feel trapped by no time, we have lost touch with the eternal. We feel victimized by our lengthy to-do lists and day planners. When we view time from a linear perspective, we feel as though we are hurtling toward our own untimely ends. Organic time, on the other hand, Paintner says, is cyclical and sees periods of destruction as making the way for new growth and possibility. Autumn and winter always lead to springtime. When religious traditions write about life after death being eternal, they don't mean that we will live as we do now, only with an endless number of days. Instead, they mean that we will be immersed in the now. The purpose of most spiritual practices is simply to arrive right here, right now. Spiritual practices aren't about momentarily relaxing so that we can then pack even more into our days. Rather, spiritual practices are ends in themselves that allow us to experience eternity in this moment. Theologian Paul Tillich spoke of what he called the eternal now. The eternal now is the ground from which all things emerge and perish in each and every moment. For Tillich, salvation, that which saves us, is to be found in fully recognizing and experiencing the present moment. Philosophers and poets and mystics and theologians have for a very long time been telling us that heaven doesn't necessarily exist somewhere up beyond the clouds in the sky. Heaven exists in our ability to fully experience here and now. The pearly gates are, in fact, the open doors of our own awakened consciousness. And being immersed in the present moment can not only save our perishing souls, it can also help us be present in more meaningful ways for those around us. Tara Brach tells the story of a woman who was spending the evening with her mother, and her mother told her that she'd been diagnosed with breast cancer. The initial shock for this woman was really intense. Then she went into planning mode on behalf of her mother. What needs to happen? What are the treatment options? How soon do we get the lump removed? Rather than pausing, she was going into a sort of control mode. But the woman soon realized that control mode wasn't working. She says, "My mother didn't want to talk about any of these things. As I was weighing her options, whether it was a biopsy, mastectomy, etc., she sat on the high-top chair in my kitchen, staring blankly into a cup of coffee. I was trying to be strong for her sake and mine, but it suddenly became clear that wasn't what she needed. She was scared and needed to be scared." Staying busy, the woman says, was my way of avoiding a total collapse. But being present, pausing and being present, allowed me to shift her way. I took a breath, walked across the room, and wrapped my arms around her. It was an awkward sideways hug, but it was also a long, necessary one. The woman goes on, and then something happened. Slowly, my mom started rocking from side to side like a mother rocks a child, except the child was now the caretaker. It was a sweet, tiny moment I'll never forget, and one that I surely would have missed were it not for the power of mindfulness. Tara Brach observes, the blessing of a pause. This shift from being in the grip of the controlling self, which is our more familiar identity, to, in that pause, opening to inhabit loving presence, leads to a sensitivity that can then respond to our world with some wisdom. The blessing of stillness, the blessing of silence, the blessing of a pause can be life-restoring, both for ourselves and for those around us. Some of the best descriptions of these moments of sudden awareness can be found in the writings of certain poets whose work is sometimes called ecstatic poetry, meaning poetry that connects the experience of a single clear moment with the experience of the essence of life and eternity. An example of one such poem is this short but exquisite piece by Robert Bly titled Watering the Horse. How strange to think of giving up all ambition. Suddenly I see with such clear eyes the white flake of snow that has just fallen in the horse's mane. There's a reason, I think, why snow often shows up in literature about stillness and experiencing the eternal now of each and every moment. Much of the quieting effect of falling snow is psychological, but it's also very much a real physical phenomenon. According to the folks at AccuWeather, there's science behind the silence of snow. That's because snow absorbs sound. So when a fresh blanket of snow covers the landscape, it absorbs many of the sound waves, making it actually quieter outside. Sound absorption is rated on a scale of 0 to 1, so something with a sound absorption rate of 0.5 absorbs 50% of the sound, for example. The sound absorption rating of snow falls somewhere between 0.5 and 0.9, meaning it absorbs much of the surrounding sound. The reason snow is able to absorb sound is because it is porous. Snowflakes are six-sided crystals and they are filled with open spaces, according to the Michigan State University Extension Office. Those spaces absorb sound waves, creating a quieting effect over a blanket of snow. Just as snow is able to absorb sound because of its porous nature, so too do we need to find ways of opening up space in ourselves in order to absorb the noisy den of outward life and living. But there needs to be some intentionality involved if we are to be successful in opening up this space for healing and transformation. So what are we to do? How are we to recapture some sense of stillness in our too busy lives this time of year? How are we to slow down, to make room in our hearts and minds for contemplation and a sense of mystery and possibility? I recommend taking little moments of stillness and beauty where you can find them and doing your best to be fully present to them. Each night before I go to bed this time of year, I pause in our living room for just a few minutes with all the lights out except for the lights on our Christmas tree. And I simply sit and breathe. And I find that in those moments, I do make space in my heart and in my very being for something new, something mysterious, something I desperately need but rarely seek or find. I suggest that we use every opportunity we can find to practice stillness. There will be a certain amount of noise and chaos inherent in this season and in our challenging lives and times. But there will also be moments when, if we are still enough and aware enough, we might hear something like angels' voices. There will be moments, if we make room for them in our hearts and minds, when we begin to sense mystery and possibility in ways that might challenge and change us and might help us change our world. I hope and pray that during this season and during all the challenging times of our lives, we will pause and make space to recognize and experience the eternal now of each moment, the crystalline present that, like the falling snow, absorbs the noisiness of the world and brings with it something like the peace of heaven. May it be so. Amen.
When windows that are black and cold are lit anew with fires of gold, when dusty quiet shall descend and darkness come once more a friend, when wings pursue their proper flight and bring not terror but delight, when worlds are innocent again and hide no storms of deadly rain, and when the sky is swept of wars and keeps but gentle moon and stars, that peaceful sky, that harmless air, how sweet the darkness there.
We'll now give and receive our morning offering. We do not have a designated beneficiary for today's offering, so any non-pledge income will go toward our general operating budget. But we will continue to have special offerings in the weeks to come as we identify and try to help meet pressing needs of the larger community. If you'd like to make a donation via our online giving system, you can do so in one of two ways. You can go to sunnyhill.org and click on the button that says Online Giving, and then follow the instructions. Once you get to the drop-down menu, just choose either 2020 Pledge if you're paying on a pledge, or non-pledge collections if you are not making a pledge payment. Or you can give by text at 412-324-3130 Just dial the number using your smartphone and follow the instructions. You can also mail a check if you prefer, and you can find our mailing address on our website at sunnyhill.org. Thank you for your generosity.
Please join us in saying the words for extinguishing our chalice.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words were, again, written by Scott Taylor. When the winds of your daring days begin to swirl, may you find your breath. May you remember that still point inside that is always waiting to welcome you back home. And from that place of sacred peace, may you be an anchor of calm for those who need it as much as you. Go in peace, go in love.